so it's even harder to clean. Why? Why do bad things happen to good people?
Wow. Well, clearly this is not a good time.
Don't you think?
All right, so y'all, that clip was to show a point. There's a phrase that people like to say a lot, and that's, when it rains, it pours. How many of y'all have experienced that? That when bad things start happening, they just keep on happening. They just keep on happening. They just keep on happening. And there's plenty of evidence in our lives today about this. There's plenty of evidence even in the Bible about this, about people like Job, who bad things just kept on happening to him. But I want to look at a story of a different guy in the Bible that bad things, or what we would say were bad things, kept on happening to him. And I want to challenge y'all with something, and that thing is to look at that phrase a little bit differently. And I want you to take the times that when life comes at you and it blindsides you and you feel like you were never prepared for what happens and the bad things keep on coming. You know, you might not be experiencing that right now. You might be in a time in your life where everything's going great. And if that's you right now, then I'm happy for you. We're all happy for you. But I can bet that you have been here before. You're either here right now or you're going to be there in the future. And what I want y'all to look at that phrase, I want y'all to say, even when it rains, God still reigns. And we're going to look at the story of a guy named Joseph. And I've talked a little bit about Joseph. If you're familiar with the Bible at all, then you've heard the story of Joseph and the coat of many colors and things like that. But the first verse that I want to look at is Genesis chapter 37, verse 2. This is where we meet Joseph. And can you put that up on the screen? It says, this is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. So when we meet Joseph, the first two things we learn about him is, the first thing is he's 17. And for y'all students right now, I'm not talking to y'all at this second right now, but for leaders, how many of y'all made awesome choices when you were 17? And some of y'all students are laughing right now, and you think you're making awesome choices, but that's because you're 17. Or you're not even 17, which is even better. But if the second thing that we learn about Joseph is that he's a tattletale. Because it says, the first thing that it says about him is that he brought his father a bad report about his brothers. So he's a 17-year-old tattletale. And that gives us a little bit of a bad taste about him right off of the bat. So we look a little further in Genesis chapter 37, verse 3. It says, now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. And continues on in verse 5. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. So he told him their dream, and in his dream was that in his dream they were cutting wheat, and their wheat stalks were bowing down to his wheat stalks. And so they hated him for it because he was kind of bragging about it. He was kind of saying, you're going to bow down to me. Excuse me. And so they hated him for it. And what I want y'all to see with this is that God speaks in our dreams. And God had put a dream in Joseph's heart, and people hated him for it. His brothers hated him for it. There's going to come times in your lives where people are going to hate you for the dreams that you have. But what I want to encourage you with is that that dream that God has put on your heart, God put on your heart for a reason. God put this dream on Joseph's heart for a reason. And we're going to see as the story goes on how he moves that dream forward, even through the years, even through waiting and waiting and waiting through bad circumstances. So they decided, his brothers that is, they decided, this is in Genesis chapter 37, verses 19 and 20. They said, "Here comes that dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." Now I want you to notice what they hated about him. It wasn't that their dad loved him more than them, or that he got stuff that they didn't because his dad made him a coat that he didn't make for any of his other sons. They hated him. They called him a dreamer like it was a bad thing. They hated him for his dream. And so they plotted to kill him. They decided at the last second, though, not to kill him. They saw some slave traders and they decided to sell him into slavery. And you might think, well, why did they decide not to kill him? And that's because God had a plan for Joseph. Because even when it rains, when he's stuck down in a cistern thinking he's going to die, even when it rains, God reigns. So you might look at Joseph and look at him like the kid at the restaurant that's been throwing a fit the whole time. Y'all know who I'm talking about. The kid is just going at it, and you're almost to the point where you're going to say, "Hey, I can fix that." And usually when you get right to about that point, the dad wipes his mouth and he gets up from the table and he says, "Son, come with me." And you think, that kid had it coming to him. We can be tempted to say that about Joseph. He was a tattletale who bragged about his dreams that he was going to be lord over his brothers, and his dad loved him and he rubbed that in their face. He was wearing that coat all the time. And you can say Joseph had it coming to him. But that's a dangerous and slippery slope when you look at other people's lives and you say they had it coming to them when you don't know the whole story. So we find Joseph again, chapter 39, verse 1. "Now Joseph had been taken into Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there." Now, if you know the story of Joseph, if you don't know the story, I'm about to give you a spoiler. But at the end of Joseph's story, he's going to become the second in command to the Pharaoh. The Bible says that the Pharaoh told him, "Only with respect to the throne will I have more power than you will." Now, if you're going to be second in command of a whole country, you think you probably need to know some military stuff? You think that, I don't know, the captain of the guard is a good guy to learn some military stuff from? So, even though he's sold into slavery, his story is still going on, and things are going to be set up for the future. He's going to spend some time in Potiphar's house, the captain of the guard. He's going to learn lots of stuff, and Potiphar's going to trust him with a lot of things. Well, Potiphar, the Bible said that Joseph was a handsome and well-built young man. That's exactly what the Bible says about him. Potiphar's wife also thought he was a handsome and well-built young man. And so she started trying to put the moves on him. She started trying to tempt him into doing something that he knew he shouldn't. But just like I'm saying, God never is turning his back on Joseph. Joseph didn't turn his back on God. Because it gets to the point where she is asking him daily to sleep with her. And he says, "How can I do such a thing and sin against God?" That's what he says about it to her. And finally, she just says, "Okay, well, if you're not going to sleep with me, I'm just going to try and ruin your life then." So she goes to her husband and says, "He tried to rape me."
Oh, she laughed for that.
So here's my question. Joseph did what he was supposed to do. Joseph didn't turn his back on God. God didn't turn his back on Joseph. So everything worked out with a happy ending in this story, right? No. It says, Genesis chapter 39, verse 20. "Joseph's master took him and put him in the prison the place where the king's prisoners were confined. So he did the right thing. He told the truth. She lied. But Potiphar believed his wife over Joseph. And he got thrown in prison. Now, we're going to keep in mind the end of the story, though. Joseph's getting set up to be the second in command of the whole country of Egypt. It says that the prison that he's in is a place where the king's prisoners are held. The best place to learn some political secrets is in a prison where the king's prisoners, politicians are, it's easy to meet them in jail. So, while he's in jail, he meets the cupbearer and the baker. They don't tell us why the cupbearer and why the baker were thrown in jail, but they made Pharaoh mad and they got thrown in jail. And Joseph comes across them and sees that it says their faces were down. And so he said, "What's the matter?" And they said, "Well, we had these dreams and we can't figure it out." Well, Joseph said, "I know something about dreams." So the cupbearer goes first. He tells him his dream. And he says, "Good news. That means in 3 days, you're going to get your job back. The Pharaoh's going to realize he made a mistake and he's going to give you your job back." He's like, "Oh, yes, awesome." But he says, "Hey, when you get back to Pharaoh's house, don't forget about me." He says, "No, man, I got you." So then the baker gets excited. The baker says, "Well, here's what my dream was." And he says, "Yeah, you're going to die. So you don't have to remember me. You don't have to remember me because in 3 days you're going to die." Well, anyway, 3 days come, the cupbearer gets taken back to Pharaoh's house. He gets his job back. But the cupbearer didn't remember Joseph.
Wow.
It says that the cupbearer forgot about it. Now my question is, if you have a dream and God's put this dream on your heart, how long do you wait for that dream? And the answer to that question is, you wait for that dream until it comes to fruition. Because the Bible says Joseph sat in that prison for 2 years, waiting for his chance to realize his dream. So then the Pharaoh starts having dreams. And he calls all of his wizards and everybody, all of his dream interpreters, and he tells them the dreams, and they're crazy dreams. Cows were eating cows, stuff like that. And they say, "Yeah, we got nothing. We don't know what your dream meant." Well, the cupbearer just happened to be bringing him his wine or whatever and heard it. And he was like, "Oh, snap. You remember when I was in jail? I met a guy who told me what my dream meant." And Pharaoh said, "Well, go get him." So they brought Joseph before him, and he said, "I'm told that you can interpret dreams." And this is what Joseph said. Just to show you, again, Joseph didn't turn his back on God. Genesis chapter 41, verse 16. He says, "Tell me my dream." And Joseph says, "I cannot do it. But God will give Pharaoh the answer that he's looking for." He's saying, it's not me. I'm nothing without the gift that God gave me to interpret this dream. You see, when things seem like they're out of control, when the rain is pouring down, you got to remember that God reigns. Because he interpreted Pharaoh's dream. And just like I told you, the story was going to end. Joseph ended up being second in command of the entire country of Egypt. Now, the point in that is that for 2 years he sat in a prison. And it was really easy for him to think that he was being punished. It was really easy to think that he should just give up on what he knew he was supposed to do with his life. But he might not be punishing you if you feel like you're in this place right now. He might be preparing you. He might be making you a slave, but he might be making you a slave in the captain of the guard's house. He might be throwing you in prison, but he might be throwing you in a political prison where all the king's prisoners are going to be, and you're going to learn everything you need to know about the Pharaoh. And just so you know, at the end of the story is where Joseph's dream finally comes to fruition. You see, there was a famine over the whole country. And Joseph was the governor. And Joseph's brothers had to come and ask for food from him. They didn't know it was Joseph. Remember, they sold him to slavery years ago, told his dad that he was dead. And they had to bow down to Joseph to get food from him. So all that time that Joseph could have been bitter, all that time that Joseph could have given up, all that time that Joseph could have thought, maybe this dream isn't God's will for my life, Joseph never gave up. And even in the storm that was happening in Joseph's life, God reigned. So y'all pray with me. God, I know this story speaks to me. When I look back at my life and I look back at places I was years ago, and I might see that I'm not where I want to be right now, but I'm sure not where I was. I may not be everything that I thought I needed to be. And I may not be on the path that I think I need to be on. But I pray that in this time you help me remember that your thoughts are so much higher than my thoughts, and your ways are so much greater than my ways. And you know the path that you have me on. And I pray that there's someone in here tonight that feels like the rain is just never stopping in their life. They can remember the songs we sang, the things we talked about, and they can remember that even when it rains, you reign. All these things I ask in Jesus' name. Amen.